I live in a cozy little cul-de-sac in the suburbs. You know the type. Neat lawns, matching mailboxes, one of those live, laugh, love kind of neighborhoods where everything looks like it came from a catalog. It's the kind of place where people pretend their lives are perfect by pruning their hedges aggressively and holding competitive potlucks. I moved here 3 years ago. It was a compromise. Close enough to work that I could avoid soul-crushing commutes, quiet enough that I could sleep with my windows open, and just far enough from my in-laws to keep the peace. The neighbors weren't bad, either. We had a retired jazz drummer who grilled shirtless year-round, a dog groomer who dressed her poodle better than most humans, and a sweet elderly couple who baked unsolicited muffins. I could live with that. But then there was her, Marcy, the self-declared queen bee of our homeowners association, HOA president, commander-in-chief of petty affairs, and proud wielder of a laminated clipboard that might as well have been Excalibur. Marcy had that Karen hair, the aggressively layered, over-bleached bob, and a voice like a malfunctioning smoke detector that you couldn't ignore even if you tried. She ruled with a pastel fist. Your trash bins better be pulled in by 9:01 a.m. on collection day, or you'd get a warning. Plant something that blooms out of season? Warning. Kids chalk art on the sidewalk. Graffiti. I once got a letter because my garden gnome was not in accordance with the approved color palette. The gnome was beige. To be fair, there were perks to living here. The HOA fees kept the place clean. The neighborhood park had brand new tennis courts. And when Marcy wasn't busy weaponizing bylaws, the place looking safe and respectable. So for the most part, I tolerated her tyranny. Besides, moving is expensive and emotionally draining, and my espresso machine just fit in my kitchen. But then one humid Tuesday morning, everything changed. I was sipping my coffee on the porch, contemplating whether to mow the lawn or let the dandelions rebel, when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a large moving truck beeping its way into the cul-de-sac. A new neighbor? We hadn't had one in over a year. I watched with mild curiosity, mostly to make sure they didn't scratch my mailbox with the U-Haul. And then I saw her. A woman wearing designer sportswear attacked a moving truck as if it had personally offended her. She barked orders at the movers like a sergeant with a megaphone. Except the megaphone was her nasal voice, and the volume knob was permanently stuck on shriek. One poor guy tried to set a box down too close to the driveway. She stopped him mid-lift with a pointed finger and the phrase, "Do I look like I want that there?" Classic Karen. Textbook even. I didn't even need to hear her name. You could just tell. The manicured nails, the oversized sunglasses, the aura of espresso-fueled rage barely contained under layers of dry shampoo. We had just imported a brand new Karen into our delicate HOA ecosystem. And then it happened, the meeting of the monarchs. Marcy strutted across the street with that clipboard clutched like a holy relic and her HOA name tag flashing in the morning sun. She had that look, the one cats get when you bring a new kitten home. Suspicion and condescension in equal measure. She stopped at the edge of the driveway, adjusted her pearl necklace like it granted her social authority, and delivered the patented Marcy greeting. Welcome to Whispering Pines. I'm the head of the HOA. If you have any questions about the community guidelines, I'd be more than happy to help. The new Karen, whose name I would later learn was Cheryl, didn't even flinch. She looked Marcy up and down, as if deciding whether to swat a fly or unleash nuclear war. Then, in a voice oozing passive aggression and sweetened venom, she replied, "Oh, you're the one in charge? How adorable." It was like watching two alpha lions size each other up on the savannah, except instead of claws and roars, it was designer handbags and condescension. I leaned against my porch railing, sipped my coffee, and whispered to myself, "Oh, this is going to be good." The first shots in the War of the Karens were silent, just polite smiles stretched too tight and phrases like, "Bless your heart," that sounded suspiciously like threats. But by the end of that first week, the passive aggression had gone nuclear. It started small. Marcy dropped off a copy of the HOA guidelines at Cheryl's doorstep. Not in the mailbox. Not with a warm welcome note. Just plopped onto the doormat, like a flaming bag of bureaucracy. By morning, Cheryl had taped it to her garbage bin with a post-it that read, "I don't need a bedtime story, thanks." And that was it. The line in the mulch had been drawn. The next day, Marcy hit her with an official warning. Front yard decor, not in compliance. Inflatable lawn flamingos are considered non-regulation wildlife. Cheryl's response? She doubled the flamingos. Overnight, 6 more pink monstrosities sprouted on her lawn like some kind of neon avian infestation. I swear one of them had sunglasses. It was glorious. The neighborhood started picking sides. Some of the older folks, the ones who remembered the Cold War, just shook their heads and said, "Here we go again." But most of us, we were hooked. It was like reality TV, except we didn't need cable, just a lawn chair and snacks. I wasn't alone either. Frank, my neighbor across the street, bought a pair of binoculars and started documenting the conflict. He said it was for legal reasons, but the man hadn't watched this much drama since his wife got him hooked on The Bachelor. Even Linda, the poodle lady, put a little lawn sign out that read, "Team Cheryl." That was bold. No one crossed Marcy, not unless they wanted their begonias audited. Then came phase 2, the paper bombardments. Both Karens began weaponizing the HOA complaint process. Cheryl started filing official reports against Marcy for excessive noise from her wind chimes. Yes, wind chimes. Apparently, they were producing a haunting metallic screech that disturbed the peace. I mean, they weren't great, but still. Marcy fired back with a formal notice citing Cheryl's aggressive use of spotlighting after she installed motion sensor lights. That one actually made sense. Those things could fry your retinas from 3 blocks away. It escalated quickly. Marcy accused Cheryl of willfully endangering the HOA ecosystem. Not joking, her words, by leaving her recycling bins out for an extra day. Cheryl countered by reporting Marcy to the county zoning office for having an unregistered garden shed that may be used for illicit storage. When zoning inspectors actually showed up, we realized this wasn't just petty anymore. This was chess. And Cheryl? Oh, Cheryl wasn't just playing. She was opening every game with a queen's gambit of subpoenas. Marcy tried to rally the HOA board, but here's the thing. After 3 years of her reign of terror, most of the board was just done. They'd nod in meetings, agree with her ideas, and then quietly vanish when it came time to enforce anything. Meanwhile, Cheryl began cultivating her own little fan base. She hosted a neighborhood wine night. No HOA approval, of course, and most of the block showed up. She served fancy cheese, rose from actual glass bottles. Marcy only ever brought boxed Chardonnay, and played smooth jazz like she was running a wine bar out of her garage. And then she did the unthinkable. She handed out pamphlets, real, glossy ones, about dissolving the HOA. It was like watching someone toss a match into a hay barn. Marcy lost it. The very next morning, she was out before sunrise, personally measuring Cheryl's mailbox height and angle with a leveler. She apparently didn't like something, so she kicked it a little, and by noon Cheryl received an official notice of violation. The mailbox is slightly off-center, a potential threat to the aesthetic appearance of the neighborhood. We howled. Even the mailman laughed, and he's usually stone-faced no matter what you stick in the mailbox. But Marcy wasn't laughing. Cheryl had poked the bear, and that bear had bylaws. We thought it might end there. Maybe Cheryl would back down. Maybe she'd decide it wasn't worth it. But nah. That evening, Cheryl stood in her driveway, sipping from a crystal wine glass, watching as a man in a state government polo took pictures of Marcy's front yard. Apparently, Cheryl had filed an anonymous report alleging misuse of HOA funds and unpermitted landscaping. The next day, Marcy's flower beds were roped off and caution tape like a crime scene. At this point, it stopped being a neighborhood. It became an arena. We weren't Whispering Pines anymore. We were ground zero. The rest of us were just trying to survive while 2 HOA-bred titans clashed in an ever-escalating Cold War of clipped hedges and cease and desist letters. Every day brought new madness. One morning, a man from the state auditor's office pulled up in an unmarked car and asked if anyone knew where to find Marcy Reynolds. When he said her full name, with a clipboard of his own, half the street peeked through blinds like kids watching the ice cream truck. By that evening, Marcy's face was the color of expired egg salad. Apparently, Cheryl had submitted pages of alleged financial misconduct to the state. Everything from suspicious landscaping contracts to unapproved HOA expenditures on decorative lighting. Read. Fairy lights around Marcy's pergola. The woman basically audited our dictator into a panic spiral. But Marcy wasn't down yet. Like any apex Karen backed into a corner, she went full scorched earth. She called a mandatory emergency HOA meeting. And let me tell you, I hadn't seen this many of my neighbors in one room since the Great Chili Cook-Off of 2019. Marcy marched in with a folder thick enough to stop a bullet and slapped it onto the table. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "our newest resident has repeatedly violated our neighborhood standards. I have here documentation." She said that last word like it gave her goosebumps. She then spent the next 30 minutes rattling off everything Cheryl had allegedly done wrong. Using non-HOA approved garbage bags. Yes, that's a thing now. Hanging wind chimes without clearance, leaving her porch light on past 11 p.m. And, my personal favorite, allowing her garden hose to rest in a manner inconsistent with community aesthetics. When Marcy pulled out photos of said hose lying slightly crooked on Cheryl's lawn, someone in the back choked on their LaCroix. But Cheryl? Oh, she just smiled. She stood up, looked at her with her Karen look, smiled, and said, "Interesting thing about documentation, Marcy. I brought some too." She opened a manila envelope like a magician revealing a trick. Inside, copies of emails, letters, and screenshots, all pointing to years of overreach, unapproved personal reimbursements, and HOA elections that had, let's say, irregularities. She'd been building a case. Quietly, meticulously, with the cold efficiency of someone who's argued with a flight attendant and won. By the end of the meeting, 3 people resigned from the board, 2 left the room pretending they had an emergency dental appointment, and 1 guy, bless you, Mike from Lot 12, just started slow clapping. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The balance of power was shifting. In our neighborhood, it was now completely unrecognizable. People were taking sides openly. You had Team Marcy, mostly the older crowd and those weirdly invested in property values. Then there was Team Cheryl, the rebels, the renters, and the people who just wanted to use lawn flamingos as God intended. I heard rumors Linda was printing t-shirts. But the real twist came the following week, when Cheryl filed a motion with the county to temporarily suspend the HOA's authority pending investigation. That's right. She legally handcuffed Marcy. For the first time in over a decade, our neighborhood was functionally lawless. No warnings. No fines. No clipboard patrols. People lost their damn minds. Todd from the end of the street built a fire pit. In the front yard, Janet parked her RV sideways in her driveway, just because she could. One guy even repainted his door neon green out of pure spite. It was like the purge, but for suburban dads. Meanwhile, Marcy was unraveling. She tried calling emergency board meetings. No one came. She sent out printed newsletters titled, "Restoring Order in Whispering Pines." They ended up as coasters under wine glasses at Cheryl's second wine night, which now had twice the attendance, by the way. And then, the final blow. Cheryl, in an act of magnificent, petty genius, hired an attorney. Not to sue Marcy, no? That would have been too easy. She sued the HOA itself, on behalf of all residents. The lawsuit claimed negligent oversight, misuse of dues, and psychological distress caused by repeated and arbitrary enforcement of unenforceable bylaws. She even had Frank, the guy with the binoculars, as a witness. It was an art form. By this point, our peaceful suburb had become a living, breathing soap opera. People stopped talking about the weather. We talked about motions, about witness depositions, about Marcy's meltdown on Nextdoor when someone dared to suggest the HOA picnic be potluck style. It was like the entire neighborhood had collectively discovered drama was more satisfying than manicured lawns. We weren't mowing anymore. We were watching. And then, it all came crashing down. The investigation into the HOA, spearheaded by Cheryl's lawyer, who wore cufflinks shaped like gavels, unearthed things none of us expected. Turns out, Marcy had been dipping into the HOA's discretionary fund. Nothing massive, but enough to raise eyebrows. Landscaping reimbursements that didn't match invoices. Mystery consulting fees. A $300 purchase labeled Community Beautification that turned out to be an LED koi pond for her backyard. Even worse, she hadn't held a legitimate board election in 5 years. Apparently, she'd been rolling over her position due to lack of interest, which, while technically legal under the bylaws, looked very bad in front of a state compliance officer. The HOA board, or what was left of it, collapsed like a Jenga tower made of expired printer paper. 2 members resigned for health reasons. One just vanished completely. We think he moved to Arizona, and the last tried to claim they were only involved in a ceremonial capacity, which isn't a thing in HOAs, last I checked. And Marcy? She finally cracked. She stormed into the final emergency HOA hearing, which was held in Frank's garage because we had nowhere else to legally meet, and let loose a speech so dripping in fury and denial it should have been set to an organ soundtrack. "I built this neighborhood," she shouted, voice trembling. "Do you think those pet waste stations just installed themselves? I sacrificed for you people. I made this place civilized. And this is how I'm repaid." Cheryl, sitting casually in a folding chair with her signature wine glass, this time, Sauvignon Blanc, didn't even look up from her phone. "You built a kingdom of fines, Marcy," she said. "And you taxed us all to sit on your paper throne." Even I had to admit, damn, that was cold. Marcy stormed out. Word got around she was trying to sell the house. Fast. Whispers spread that the investigation had spooked her bad. She claimed it was time for a fresh start. But let's be honest, she was getting out before the reputation stuck like mildew on vinyl siding. Cheryl, meanwhile, strutted around the neighborhood like a victorious general sipping Pinot Grigio from a stainless steel wine tumbler that said, "Not today, Karen." But here's the plot twist we didn't see coming. Cheryl didn't stay either. Barely a week after Marcy's for sale sign went up, Cheryl's house got listed too. The neighborhood went into full-on conspiracy mode. Was it guilt? Boredom? Fear that without a worthy opponent, she'd turn on us? The real reason came out during her goodbye party. Yes, a party, because apparently we throw those now. I asked her, point blank, "Why are you leaving?" "You won." She just sipped her wine, gave a Mona Lisa smile, and said, "Darling, I don't stay in places like this. I just fix them." Turns out Cheryl had already bought a condo downtown. Something about high ceilings, zero lawn maintenance, and no HOA. She said she'd done her duty here. Some say she was a vigilante. Others say she was just bored. I say she was a one-woman wrecking ball wrapped in Lululemon and Chardonnay. But whatever she was, she left a crater where 2 Karens once stood. The neighborhood held its breath. What now? When both Karens were gone, there was this weird stillness, like the kind of quiet after a thunderstorm, where everything smells like wet pavement and you realize the air feels lighter. Cheryl's moving truck pulled away mid-morning on a Thursday, and not a single flamingo was left behind. Marcy had left a week earlier, her goodbye consisting of a bitter note on the community bulletin board that read, "You'll miss order when you're knee-deep in trash and inflatable Santas." Spoiler, we did not. That evening, something beautiful happened. People emerged from their homes like we'd been under siege. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in months stood on their front lawns, coffee mugs and beers in hand, blinking in the sunlight like groundhogs checking for shadows. Frank wore his binoculars around his neck, out of habit. Linda brought out celebratory cupcakes frosted to look like flamingos, because of course she did. And then someone said it. I'm not even sure who. "Wait, is it really over?" A pause. Then another voice. "Are we free?" And then, the most magical thing I've ever witnessed in suburbia, spontaneous applause. We clapped like it was the end of a Broadway show. Someone shouted, "We should have a barbecue." And suddenly, it was like we'd time-traveled to a version of this neighborhood where people actually liked each other. Even Todd, the fire pit guy, pulled out his grill. Unpermitted. Unapologetic. Glorious. And then old Mr. Callahan, the guy who never says more than 5 words and still mows in jeans, leaned on his cane and said, real quiet, "Maybe this is how it ends." We turned to him. He adjusted his hat, squinted at Cheryl's empty porch, and added, "Maybe the Karens'll all destroy each other. One cul-de-sac at a time. Maybe that's how this all crumbles." We stood there, silent, as if someone had just predicted the fall of Rome with a beer in hand and barbecue sauce on their chin. And damn it, we believed him. The next week, we voted, and with no HOA left to officially block it, the community unanimously decided to disband the HOA entirely. Done. Over. Good riddance. We tore down the signs, repurposed the HOA bulletin board into a community library, and burned the old HOA guidelines in Todd's front yard fire pit. Don't worry, it was symbolic. We had esmores. Now, well, people plant what they want. Janet has a purple mailbox now. Someone even painted a mural on their garage door of a unicorn punching a filing cabinet. No one questioned it. And me? I finally got to put my beige gnome back. His name is Steve. He's thriving. We still joke about it, of course. When someone gets a little too into recycling rules or starts eyeing someone's holiday lights, we say, "Oh, is that a Karen spark I see?" And everyone laughs. But deep down, I think we all remember what it took. 2 Karens. Locked in suburban Mortal Kombat. Petty? Absolutely. Epic? Without question. Effective? Oh yes. Because somehow, in destroying each other, they freed us. And if that's not a suburban Christmas miracle, I don't know what is. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.